In one of those cars moments ago, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky.
It was a stretch limo.
He demanded it.
No, it was a helicopter on the roof. Come on.
Senator Paul and his wife, Kelley Paul, join us right now. They have written a brand new book. It's called The Case Against Socialism, and they join us live. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
You bet. We're going to talk about your book in just a moment. But, Senator, so much of our attention, in the news media has been about the Ukraine situation. You want an investigation into a letter three of your fellow colleagues in the Senate wrote to Ukraine, trying to dig up some stuff, a year and a half ago?
I think the only thing consistent about the whole discussion of people threatening Ukrainian aid is that everybody seems to be doing it on both sides. But it can't really be one side. They're accusing the president of doing it. Well, Joe Biden threatened the aid. And then 3 senators wrote a letter to the Ukrainian government. They said, if you don't continue investigating Trump and help the Mueller investigation, we may pull back on your aid. So it sounds like everybody and their brother is threatening Ukrainian aid. So we can't have two standards. Democrats get to threaten Ukrainian aid, nothing happens to them. Now they want to impeach a president over this. I think it's looking more and more like it's just very much a partisan attack.
How can you not want to hear from the whistleblower? Adam Schiff says yesterday, we don't need to hear from the whistleblower. I thought that he was at the hub of everything.
One of the interesting things about the whistleblower is I think people should ask how he got the information or she got the information, because I think it was gotten illegally. Only a certain people can listen to the phone call, and I think very few should be listening to the president's phone calls. But that group was selected. The whistleblowers outside of that group. So somebody in this small group broke the law. And you could say, well, maybe it's not that important. Well, what if they gave out the nuclear secrets or something really important to our national security, the name of a spy or something? You can't have people in the inner circle that can listen to the president's phone calls leaking that information illegally. They need to be punished and removed from government.
How will the Senate react to this? Are the Republicans in the Senate going to get together and try to support this president if they don't believe that that was an impeachable offense?
I think there's a great deal of talk about, the idea of whether or not, impeaching someone over this, particularly since the Democrats did something very similar in threatening the aid and saying if you don't investigate Trump. It sounds like the Democrats have done exactly the same thing they're accusing the president of doing. I think in the end it's going to be seen by the American public as very partisan. If the House sends it over, I think it'll be voted down in the Senate.
So, Kelley, let's pivot to your book that you wrote with the senator. How does socialism resonate with you? I know if Tucker Carlson endorses the book, it's got to be good. How did you realize this is a project you want to work on together? What about socialism struck home?
Rand taught a course at GW, and he talked about the dystopian novel. He taught this course. He has a background, he's a medical doctor, but he's also always been a huge fan of Dostoevsky and the dystopian novelists before that. So he taught this really interesting course, and had written quite a bit about it. And then he got the idea to turn this into a book, because we started with the philosophy.
And then she said we should make it interesting. And then she said, that's really dry. Let's add some current
So he
events.
wrote a lot about the philosophy, then the history of socialism, which, as you know, from Mao to Pol Pot to Stalin is horrific. And then I got involved and wrote a lot of the sections on what they actually do in Scandinavia, because Bernie and Elizabeth Warren like to talk so much about Denmark and Sweden.
What do they do?
They mischaracterize it, number one.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing that I pretty much learned in doing research for this is Bernie Sanders is too liberal to get elected in Denmark. Pretty much everything that they advocate for, they don't actually do much of those things in Scandinavia. They have very low corporate taxes. They were much lower than ours until the Trump tax cuts lowered our corporate taxes. They have no punitive wealth taxes. They tried that back in the 70s, and all of the wealthy left. The founder of IKEA, Bjorn Borg. So now their wealthy are taxed pretty much at the same level as people who make $60,000 a year. So the big lie is it's a mathematics problem. If you want free health care and free college tuition, you pretty much only do that by taxing the middle class at about $60,000, 60%, and they have a VAT tax, a value-added tax of 25% on everything they buy. A dozen eggs, a pair of jeans, everything.
But this is something a lot of people in your husband's business talk about, trying to make things more, when you look at a recent poll, I think 43% of American senators said that socialism maybe could be a good thing for the United States of America. 43%. How did that number get to be 43%?
Yeah, and that sort of boggles my mind, because when I tell people we've written a book called The Case Against Socialism, like, really? Should that be necessary? But I think our kids aren't being taught the history. And the history of socialism really time and time again is associated with genocide and famine. But our kids don't know who Mao was. They don't know who Pol Pot was. They barely know who Stalin was. None of them seem to remember that Hitler was a socialist as well. And then they say, oh, that's just an accident that those people became dictators. And it's like, well, no, maybe it's part of socialism that authoritarianism is what socialism devolves into.
But, Senator, when you look at the New Deal, when you look at Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, people say those are some socialistic principles and policies, aren't they? How do they fit in?
Yeah, we address that in the book in the sense that any use of government force is something that takes away your liberty, and that's the argument why our founding fathers said we want to minimize it. So we don't say that there's no government. We have some Social Security, we have Medicare involvement, but we want to make sure that we don't make taxes so expansive that you have to tax 100% of your income, because then you're not really free. So many people in our country are around 50%. It's sort of a pendulum. Do you want to be 60% or 40%? Do you want to be 70, 80, 90%? You know, Bernie Sanders is talking about taxing people virtually all of their wealth.
Yeah.
Right, not his book, though. He can keep his $1 million.
All right, well, sounds very interesting. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about it. How are you feeling?
You know, I'm getting better. I'm almost back. It takes a lot to, you know, get me down, so I'm coming back.
Good.
All right, that's why she did most of the work in the book.
That's right.
The Case Against Socialism, it's a dual effort. Good job, guys.
Thank you very much.
I'll talk to you on radio a little bit later.